Hi all, welcome to the course Facilitating Difficult Conversations. I'm Dr. Laura Black, a professor of communication studies, and I'll be teaching your course. What makes conversations difficult? That's the key issue in our course, is how do we facilitate difficult conversations well? So let's start by thinking about why are conversations difficult sometimes? On a basic level, difficult conversation is just any conversation you find hard to have, right? So they tend to rile up our emotions, involve some sort of conflict or disagreement, or present us with awkward or uncomfortable situations, right? They can be the topic of something that's uncomfortable or difficult can vary a whole lot, right? And all of that stuff is valid. There can be lots of reasons that conversations are difficult. Some might be personal, some might be political, some might be purely circumstantial, like you're just not in the space to have a conversation right then. So all that stuff is valid. But in our course, we're going to start by tackling the really complex, difficult conversations. Not just ones that make us vaguely uncomfortable or kind of awkward, but the ones that deal with people's worldviews and identities and focus on complex topics that seem almost impossible to thoroughly address. It's not hard to find these conversations. Look in the news, social media, even our local communities. We find lots of communication about controversial topics: politics, religion, climate, money, guns, war, migration, sexuality, education, any of that stuff. These are all big topics. And when we talk about them, these conversations can seem very predictable, kind of polarized, and honestly, kind of pointless sometimes, right? We've all been there. So why do they feel that way? Well, conversations about these topics, they're really not usually just about the specific details of a proposed policy, for example, if you're talking about politics. But these kind of conversations, they tap into our deeply held values, into our identities. They challenge our ideas about what it means to be a good person. They bring questions onto our personal experiences and our beliefs about how the world works. So these conversations are difficult not just because the topic itself is complex, although the topics often are complex. They're difficult because even engaging in the conversation is profoundly tied up in how we see ourselves and what we value. That's incredibly challenging, right? So the good news for us is that there are lots of people and organizations who are working hard to create meaningful, productive, ethical, and inclusive conversations about difficult topics. These folks help people engage in dialogue across differences or in rigorous, inclusive deliberation about important topics facing their communities. So in this course, we're going to learn about those efforts. We're going to learn some skills that we need to develop in order to host and facilitate those kinds of conversations, and we'll have a chance to work on improving our own competence in this kind of stuff. We're focusing on really tough topics, but the things we learn in this course can not only prepare you to have those kinds of difficult conversations, but also to transfer to other kind of maybe smaller scale difficult conversations you might experience in other parts of your life. So as a professor, I do lots of research on things like public deliberation and dialogue, but I also do a lot of work in my local community, right? So I'm one of the folks who does this kind of work. I've facilitated conversations like this for over 20 years, including helping civic leaders get community input on controversial topics like school redistricting or city planning or responding to racist incidents. I've also worked with student groups, university folks, nonprofit leaders, and I've learned a lot from this work, and I've learned a lot from being part of professional networks of facilitators and peace builders outside of academia. So in this course, I'm bringing not just my knowledge of research, but like my lived experience as a practitioner of this kind of stuff. And I've heard a million times, this work is idealistic and optimistic, and that's not how politics works. You know what, though? Although those critiques aren't completely off base, they're also not true. They're not correct. This kind of positive work is being done all around the world, and it has huge potential to make these difficult conversations both easier and more impactful for our world. So, what's that mean for us? In this first module of the course, you will be introduced to some kind of fundamental ideas that'll run through the rest of our time together. We have readings about ideas of difference and diversity and why those matter in these difficult conversations. We also have a couple readings that help us work through the idea of civility, which is a concept that gets a lot of uptake and also gets a lot of critique. Civility is one of these ideas that a lot of people can really get behind because it helps provide a way for us to treat each other with respect. But it's also a word that is used to silence people sometimes. And so it's important to ask ourselves, who gets to decide what counts as civil? And what happens if that definition of civility shifts? Finally, we're introduced some ideas about how to address difficult conversations. You'll be asked to work with these ideas in your assignments for the week, but these are things we're going to keep coming back to throughout the course. This module is just getting us started. So that's it for now. Contact me if you've got questions or just want to chat about any of this stuff, and I look forward to seeing your discussions and reflections.